They don't cheer for heroes. They cheer for survivors. For those of us who still bleed, but don't fall. They think survival means strength. That if you walk out of the arena on your feet, sword in hand, you must be the better man. But they don't see what happens in the space between one heartbeat and the next. They didn't see what I saw, in his face, in his hesitation. The truth is, I didn't win that day. I didn't earn anything. I lived because someone else chose not to finish what he started. That's not victory. That's something darker. Something I carry like a wound no one can see. They dressed me for slaughter that morning. Not with armor, not with glory, just enough to keep the crowd entertained. A leather strap across my chest, a worn gladius, a chipped shield that smelled of old sweat and defeat. I could feel the eyes of the other slaves on me as I passed. Some looked away, too afraid to admit they might be next. Others watched with that dead, hollow stare, the kind you learn after watching too many boys disappear behind the gate and never come back. The corridor beneath the arena was colder than usual. I walked slow, not from fear, but from something heavier. My feet didn't want to move. Every step was like wading through water thick with ghosts. I could already hear the crowd above me, distant, distorted, like thunder beneath stone. They shouted my name, or maybe not mine. Maybe the name they gave me. Corvus, the Raven, something to put on posters and wine cups. I never chose it. They did, because that's what I was to them. Not a man, not even a warrior. Just a bird on a leash, made to dance for blood. When they opened the gate, the light hit me like a slap. I stepped into the sand, and the world roared to life. Thousands of voices, all blending into a single, monstrous hunger. I didn't look at them. I couldn't. My eyes locked on the figure across the arena. He was already there. Tall. Still. Silent. His skin was darker than mine. His armor heavier. But it wasn't the gear that made him dangerous. It was the stillness. The absolute calm of a man who had seen death so many times, it no longer surprised him. He didn't pace, didn't pose. He just stood, sword at his side, as if the world around him had stopped moving. They called him Marcus the Red. I had heard the stories, that he had never lost, that once, when ordered to kill 2 boys at once, he refused, and killed the guard who gave the command instead. They didn't punish him. They promoted him. That's the kind of man he was, the kind who didn't need to yell or snarl. You knew, just by the way he looked at you, that he could end your life without thinking twice. But he didn't look at me like prey. He looked at me like a question. We circled, slowly. The crowd grew restless, shouting for blood, for motion, for pain. I tightened my grip on the sword, palms slick with sweat. I expected a rush, a charge, a roar, something brutal. But instead, he spoke. Quietly, like we were alone in an empty room. "You're not ready," he said. I flinched. He didn't move. "You're young, fast maybe, but not ready." "I don't have a choice," I said, barely above a whisper. He nodded once. "None of us do." Then he stepped forward. Not fast, not wild, just enough. A single stroke. I blocked it by instinct, the impact jarring through my shoulder. Another came, this one a feint, pulling my shield wide. I stumbled back. He followed, patient, precise, like he was teaching me, like he didn't want to kill me, only to show me how it would be done if he did. We traded blows. Mine were wild, panicked. His were sharp, merciful. He cut my forearm, my leg, never deep, never fatal. The crowd loved it. Blood in the sand, the promise of a kill. But they couldn't see what I saw. He was holding back, and I hated him for it. Not because I wanted to die, but because he had already decided I wasn't worth killing. So I lunged, blind, desperate, and I caught him, not in the chest, not where it mattered, but just above the hip, a shallow wound. But it was real. His eyes widened slightly, not in pain, in recognition. And that was when he hesitated, just for a moment. He could have struck me down, could have split me in half, but he didn't. His blade paused in the air, and I didn't. I didn't think. I just drove my sword forward, hard, deep, into his stomach. He gasped, soft, as if surprised that I had done it. He looked down, hand clutching the blade now buried in his gut. He didn't curse, didn't beg. He just looked up at me and whispered, "Good." Then he collapsed, and the crowd roared. They called it a triumph, a rise, a new name carved into the bones of the arena. I raised my arms because they told me to, smiled because they demanded it. But inside, I felt nothing. He should have killed me. They started calling me Victor the very next day. Not Corvus, not my real name either, the one I hadn't heard in years. Just Victor. As if that single moment in the arena erased everything else about me. As if killing a man who chose not to kill me made me worthy of something. But all it gave me was a title I didn't earn, and silence where his voice used to echo. I didn't sleep that night. Not from guilt, not at first. I kept replaying it over and over, the way he looked at me before I struck. That calm, that resignation. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't trying to survive. He was letting go. And I was the knife fate chose to make it happen. I tried to believe he wanted it, that it was mercy. But it didn't feel like mercy. It felt like theft. They moved me to a better cell, bigger, cleaner. I had straw that didn't smell like rot, a small window that let in light. One of the guards, the same one who used to shove stale bread through the bars with his boot, now called me sir. He brought me wine. Not good wine, but not vinegar either. I hated him for it. I hated how quickly things changed, how easily they forgave blood when it entertained them. In the training yard, the other fighters watched me differently. Some with envy, some with fear. One or two even nodded at me now. The kind of nod men give to others they assume might survive. But none of them said his name. None of them asked what it felt like, and I didn't tell them that my hand still shook when I picked up a sword. The lanista, the owner, was pleased. He clapped my shoulder with too much force and smiled like a man who just discovered gold buried under his own floor. "You'll draw crowds now," he said. "People love a killer with a face like yours." I smiled back. It was easier than explaining that I didn't feel like a killer. I felt like a boy who flinched at thunder and stabbed a man because he blinked. They gave me new armor. Not good armor, just something less pitiful. Bronze plates shaped to fit me, a red sash to match the blood I spilled. I wore it like a lie. Every step I took in it felt heavier, not because of the metal, but because of the expectation. They wanted a beast, a champion, and I was just a shadow of someone who hesitated slightly less than the man across from him. One night, I found a mark carved into the wall of my cell. Old, faint, just an initial. M. I knew it was him. Marcus the Red. This had been his cell, his straw, his window. I sat in the corner for hours, staring at that single letter. I didn't pray. I just listened. For what, I don't know. Maybe for footsteps. Maybe for forgiveness. Days passed. Then weeks. I kept fighting. Not always to the death. Sometimes just exhibitions. Choreographed violence, like theater for the drunk and bored. But they always paired me with weaker men. And I hated that even more. I didn't want to kill them. I didn't want to be killed. I just didn't want to be seen anymore. Not like this. Not as a mask that someone else died to give me. Once a new recruit asked if it was true, if I really beat Marcus. I looked at him for a long time and said nothing. He smiled anyway, like he'd gotten the answer he wanted. That was the moment I realized something. Silence can lie just as well as words, and sometimes it lies better. I started dreaming of the fight again, but it changed. In the dream, I see him walking toward me, sword at his side, the same calm in his eyes. But when I raise my weapon, it's heavy. Too heavy. I can't lift it, and he doesn't attack. He just watches. And in that dream, every time, I drop the blade. I fall to my knees, and I say his name. And I wake up shaking, not because I'm afraid of him, but because I'm afraid I'll forget him. They said I was free to walk within the outer gates now, not out into the city. No, that freedom had a price I hadn't yet earned. But I could breathe air that wasn't laced with straw dust and sweat. I could see the sun touch the tops of buildings and hear the voices of citizens who didn't speak in threats or orders. It was supposed to feel like reward. It felt like exposure, like stepping out naked, branded. Some of them recognized me. Not by name, of course, just as him. The one who won. The one who survived Marcus the Red. A baker offered me a crust of bread, saying, "For the courage." A little boy pointed and whispered, "That's the one who never lost." But they were all wrong. I had lost the moment I was forced to win. One afternoon, I sat by the edge of the yard where the blood didn't pool. I stared at my hands. There were calluses now, layers upon layers. But beneath them, I knew the trembling still lived. That boy they all ignored, the one who blinked and flinched and hesitated. He was still inside, just quieter now, swallowed by armor and applause. The lanista sent for me that evening. "You'll fight again next moon," he said. "A real match this time, one that counts." I didn't ask what counted more than a man's life. I just nodded. That's what they wanted from me now. Silent obedience wrapped in bronze and blood. I was no longer a man in their eyes. I was a product, a promise of violence. That night, I found a piece of parchment under my cot. Just one sentence. He wanted to die. You didn't kill him. I didn't know who left it. Maybe one of the others. Maybe someone trying to console me. Or maybe it was a trick, a way to test if the guilt had taken root. But the words clung to my chest like chainmail, not heavy enough to crush me, just tight enough to never forget. When I returned to training, I noticed how the others avoided my eyes now. Not in fear, in discomfort. Like they didn't want to see the reflection of their own doubts. I wasn't better than them, just earlier. I had stumbled into a moment none of us are ready for. And I had chosen. That made me dangerous. Not because of strength, but because I had seen the end and lived. One of the new recruits, a Gaul with fire in his jaw and eyes full of thunder, asked me, what did it feel like? I thought about lying, about saying something poetic, but all I said was, it was quiet. He looked at me strange, expecting more. But what more is there? Death is loud in the crowd, loud in the bones. But in the heart, it whispers. That's what makes it stay. Before the next match, I was offered a sigil to carry, a small emblem, symbol of the house, of the arena, of power. To mark you, the guard said, so they know you're ours. I took it, stared at the silver glint, and tucked it away. Not out of loyalty, out of fear. Not of them, but of forgetting who I was before all this. I sometimes wonder what Marcus saw in those final seconds. Not my blade, not my trembling. Maybe he saw a version of himself. Maybe he knew what came after victory. Maybe he knew I wouldn't survive it, even if I lived. And maybe that was his final mercy, giving me something I couldn't return. They built statues of champions in Rome, names carved into stone, faces frozen in glory. But no one builds statues for the ones who blinked, for the ones who faltered and killed anyway. We are not remembered. We are carried in guilt, in silence, in the hollows of names that are no longer ours. I was not Corvus anymore. I was not Victor either. I was what was left when hesitation becomes survival. The arena looked smaller the second time. Not physically. The sand still stretched wide. The wall still towered. But something about it had shrunk. Maybe it was me. Maybe I had grown into the shape they wanted. Or maybe I'd hollowed out so much there was nothing left to fear. Either way, when they opened the gate, I didn't flinch. I just walked. They said my opponent was a Numidian. Tall, fast, unpredictable. They said he had killed 4 men in one fight and smiled afterward. I didn't care. Not because I was fearless, but because I had stopped trying to live. Surviving and living are not the same. I had learned that too late. The gate behind me closed like a coffin lid, and the crowd roared as if they'd raised me from it. He stepped out dressed in red leather and gold rings. Young, maybe younger than me, with eyes that didn't hate. That's what struck me first. There was no hatred in his stare, just calculation. Survival. He was here for the same reason I was, not to kill, but to remain. Our blades met fast, sparks. He was faster. I was heavier. He danced. I dragged. He slipped past me more than once, left scratches on my ribs, drew blood just enough for the crowd to feel entertained. But I kept standing, because that's all I knew how to do now. Stand and wait for someone to fall. At one point he spoke, in Latin, broken, but clear. Do you want to win? I didn't answer. What could I say? That I didn't even want to be here? That winning meant nothing if it was built on bones I couldn't forget? He circled again. He didn't press. He didn't strike when I stumbled. And suddenly I knew. He wasn't trying to win. He was trying to escape something, just like me. We clashed again, harder this time. Sand kicked up. I could hear the crowd leaning forward as if their breath alone could push us closer to blood. Then he made a mistake. Slipped. Not big, just enough. My blade was at his neck, and time stopped. It was Marcus again. Different body. Same silence. Same question. I could hear the crowd begging for death, for drama, for the illusion that this was honor, that this meant something. But it didn't. Not for me. Not anymore. I pulled back. He blinked, shocked, maybe grateful, maybe furious. He didn't strike. He stepped away. And the guards surged forward instantly, shouting. We had ruined the moment, broken the game. The crowd turned. Some booed. Some screamed. One woman shouted, "Coward!" Not at him. At me. Again. Back in the cells, the Lanista spat when he saw me. You had him. Why did you stop? I didn't answer. I just sat. Same as before. The blood dried, but not the shame. Not the shame of being the one who survives by walking away. It's a quieter shame. A colder one. One that doesn't earn you statues. Just silence. The Numidian was taken elsewhere. I never saw him again. Maybe he was punished. Maybe he was sold. Or maybe he did what I didn't have the courage to do, run. Either way, I remembered his question. Do you want to win? And now, finally, I had an answer. No. I wanted peace. I wanted to stop dreaming in sand and screams. I wanted to stop counting the dead to measure my worth. I wanted to stop pretending that killing made me more than just afraid. They didn't let me fight again. Not because I was weak, but because I had become unreliable. A broken sword. too dull to entertain, too sharp to trust. So they gave me a broom, a servant's task. I swept the training grounds where I used to bleed. I watered the sand that once drank my fear. And no one looked twice at me again. It was the closest thing to freedom I had ever known. Years later, I walked past a boy playing with wooden swords. He asked me if I had ever been a gladiator. I paused, then said, "No, I survived one." He laughed, not understanding. But I didn't expect him to. Some stories are not meant to be told. Some victories are not meant to be celebrated. Some names are better left forgotten. My name was Corvus, but that was only ever in the arena. Out here, I am no one, and I am finally at peace.